At 6:43 p.m., Daniel Parker turned onto Cedar Avenue just as the first drops of rain began striking his windshield. Seattle had a way of making even ordinary evenings feel cinematic. The windshield wipers swept slowly across the glass. The radio murmured softly in the background. Traffic crawled through the wet streets. Daniel loosened his tie and smiled to himself. It had been another 14-hour workday, another client presentation, another project approved, another promise to leave the office early that had quietly dissolved into another late evening. He reached for his phone at the next red light. One unread message. Emma. Soup's almost ready. Don't let it get cold this time. L.O.V. The message had arrived 43 minutes earlier. Daniel smiled. He quickly typed, 5 minutes away. He hesitated, then deleted it. Instead, he tapped the microphone. Hey, Em, I'm almost home. Sorry I'm late again. He ended the recording without listening to it. Traffic finally moved. He never noticed the message remained unsent. The Parker house sat at the end of a quiet, tree-lined street. The porch light glowed warmly through the rain. It looked exactly the way it had looked every evening for the past 11 years. Home. Daniel parked in the driveway. Something immediately caught his attention. The front door wasn't completely closed. It rested slightly open, only an inch, maybe 2. He frowned. Emma never left the front door open, ever. He stepped onto the porch. Rainwater dripped from the edge of the roof. Emma? No answer. He gently pushed the door open. The smell of roasted tomato soup filled the hallway, warm, fresh, as though dinner had only just been served. The television played quietly in the living room, some home renovation show, the volume low, exactly the way Emma always left it. Daniel placed his keys into the ceramic bowl beside the entrance. Em? Silence. He walked into the kitchen. The stove was still on low heat. A pot of soup simmered gently. 2 bowls sat on the counter. 2 spoons, 2 folded napkins. Steam still rose from the bread resting beneath a towel. Dinner had been ready, waiting. His eyes drifted toward the kitchen island. Emma's purse, still there. Her wallet inside. Car keys beside it. Her cell phone rested on its charging stand, battery nearly full. Daniel frowned harder. She never goes anywhere without her phone. Then he noticed something else. Her wedding ring, resting quietly beside the charger. His heartbeat slowed. Not because he understood what it meant, because he didn't. Emma? His voice echoed through the empty house. Still nothing. He searched every room, bedroom, bathroom, laundry room, garage, backyard, the small garden Emma loved so much. Empty. Even Murphy, their 12-year-old golden retriever, wandered nervously through the house, whining softly as though searching for someone he couldn't find. Daniel knelt beside him. Where's Mom, buddy? Murphy simply looked toward the front door, then back at Daniel. His tail never moved. By 7:18 p.m., Daniel had called Emma 9 times. Every call ended the same way. Her phone vibrated quietly on the kitchen counter, still charging, still unanswered. His stomach tightened. He called her sister. No, I haven't talked to her today. Her parents? No. Her best friend? Nothing. No one had seen her. No one had spoken to her. It was as though she had vanished between making dinner and sitting down to eat. At 7:48 p.m., the first police cruiser arrived. Officer Rebecca Morales stepped inside the house, carefully observing every detail. Nothing appeared disturbed.
No broken windows, no forced entry, no overturned furniture, no signs of violence. She looked toward the kitchen. Dinner was interrupted? Daniel nodded. She was here. Officer Morales glanced toward Emma's phone. And she left this behind? She never goes anywhere without it. Morales quietly wrote something in her notebook. Did the two of you argue today? Daniel looked genuinely confused. No. Yesterday? No. This week? He slowly shook his head. We're normal. The answer sounded weaker after he said it out loud. Officer Morales noticed. What does normal mean? Daniel searched for the right words. We work too much. We cancel plans. We order takeout more than we should. A faint smile crossed his face. But we're okay. He looked around the empty kitchen. We're supposed to be okay. Forensic officers photographed every room. Neighbors were interviewed. Security cameras from nearby homes were collected. The rain continued through the night. Hours passed. Nothing. No footprints, no fingerprints, no ransom call, no suspicious vehicle. Nothing. By midnight, the house had become painfully quiet. Daniel sat alone at the dining table. Emma's untouched bowl of soup rested across from him. He couldn't bring himself to move it. The chair remained exactly where she had left it, as though she might walk back in at any moment. Murphy lay underneath the table. Every few minutes he lifted his head toward the hallway, waiting. Daniel realized he was doing the same thing. The following afternoon, Officer Morales returned. Her expression had changed. She wasn't carrying investigation files anymore. She carried a sealed envelope. Behind her stood a man in a dark navy blue suit. Mr. Parker, she said quietly, this is Attorney Michael Lawson. The attorney stepped forward. I'm very sorry we're meeting under these circumstances. Daniel frowned. I don't understand. Lawson slowly removed a notarized document from his leather briefcase. This document was prepared by your wife. He paused. 23 days ago. Daniel stared at him. What document? The attorney took a careful breath. This document instructs law enforcement that if Emma Parker is reported missing, she is leaving voluntarily. She is not in immediate danger, and she does not consent to having her location disclosed. The room fell completely silent. Daniel couldn't process the words. Officer Morales spoke gently. We have verified the document. It is legally valid. Daniel looked from the attorney to the officer, then back again. His voice barely escaped. You're telling me Emma planned this? The attorney nodded once. Yes. Daniel's eyes filled with disbelief. But his voice cracked. Why? Neither of them answered, because neither of them knew. Outside, the rain finally stopped. Inside, the silence had only just begun.
3 days passed, then 7, then 14. The Parker house never felt empty. It felt unfinished. Every morning, Daniel Parker still woke up on the right side of the bed. He still reached across the mattress before opening his eyes. Every morning, his hand found nothing but cold sheets. For a brief second, his mind still believed Emma was downstairs making coffee. Then reality returned. Again. The police called every few days. No new leads. No unusual bank activity. No passport usage. No airline tickets. No hotel reservations. No surveillance footage beyond the final camera.
Emma Parker had simply stopped existing. Officer Rebecca Morales remained professional. "If Emma contacts us, we'll notify you that she's safe." Daniel asked the same question every time. "Did she leave any reason?" Every answer was identical. No. The neighborhood slowly returned to normal. Children rode bicycles again. Neighbors stopped whispering. The news vans disappeared. Only Daniel's house remained frozen in time. Emma's favorite cardigan still hung beside the front door. Her gardening gloves still rested on the patio table. The book she had been reading remained open on the nightstand, a dried lavender stem marking the page she never finished. Nothing moved. Nothing changed. Because Daniel couldn't bring himself to change anything. If he folded her sweater, it felt like admitting she wasn't coming back. On the 15th morning, Murphy scratched at Emma's home office door, over and over. Daniel had kept it closed ever since she disappeared. He wasn't ready. But Murphy refused to leave. Finally, Daniel opened the door. The familiar scent of old photographs and fresh coffee still lingered inside. Emma's photography studio looked exactly as she had left it. Vintage cameras lined the wooden shelves. Film canisters sat neatly labeled. Half-edited family portraits filled the large computer monitor. A corkboard covered one wall. Wedding shoots, family sessions, smiling children, anniversary portraits, hundreds of frozen moments. Emma had spent her life helping strangers remember the people they loved. Daniel slowly walked through the room. For the first time, he noticed something. One camera was missing. Not the expensive digital cameras, an old cream-colored Polaroid camera, the one Emma almost never used. He frowned. It was the only thing in the room that wasn't there. He searched the desk drawers, photography notebooks, receipts, memory cards, client contracts. Nothing unusual. Then, inside the bottom drawer, he found a small leather journal. No lock, no title. He opened it. The first page simply read, "Places I still wanted us to go." Below it, a handwritten list. Autumn in Vermont. Northern Lights in Alaska. A train through the Rockies. A lighthouse on the Oregon coast. Each destination had a small empty checkbox beside it. None were checked. Daniel stared at the page. He didn't remember Emma ever showing him the list. He turned another page. Weekend photography workshop. Couples retreat. Cabin reservation. Every reservation carried the same handwritten note beside it. Canceled. Client meeting. Daniel slowly lowered the paper. He remembered the meeting, a major hotel project, a promotion. He remembered telling Emma, "We'll go next year." He couldn't remember looking at her face when he said it. Near the back of the journal, another page caught his attention. The title stopped him cold. "Things I Miss." He almost read it. His fingers rested on the page. Then he quietly closed the journal. He wasn't ready. Not yet. Day 21 arrived with gray skies and steady rain. Daniel left work earlier than usual. There was no reason to stay late anymore. No one waited for him at home. As he pulled into the driveway, something sat against the front door. A small brown package. No courier, no delivery truck, no return address. His heartbeat slowed. He looked around the empty street. Nothing. He picked it up. Light, almost weightless. Inside the house, he placed the package on the kitchen island. The same kitchen, the same untouched silence. Only one chair was used now. Murphy watched quietly from the hallway. Daniel carefully opened the wrapping. Inside lay a single Polaroid photograph. His breath caught. The image showed a small wooden cabin surrounded by pine trees. Fresh snow covered the roof. A blue canoe rested beside a frozen lake. Daniel knew that place instantly. Their honeymoon, 15 years earlier. His hands began to shake. He turned the Polaroid. Written neatly in black ink were 7 words. "This was the last time you looked at me." Daniel stared at the sentence, confused. Then, slowly, a memory surfaced. The first morning after their wedding, Emma stood on the cabin porch holding a steaming mug of coffee. Snowflakes drifted through the air. Daniel had lowered his camera, looked directly into Emma's eyes, and smiled. Not because she was posing, not because he wanted a photograph, because he couldn't stop looking at her. It had been effortless, natural, real. Daniel looked back at the Polaroid. His breathing became uneven. Who had taken this photograph? Who knew where they had been? More importantly, who knew exactly what that morning meant? Outside, the rain tapped softly against the windows. Inside, for the first time since Emma disappeared, Daniel realized he wasn't chasing a missing person anymore. Someone was leading him through his own marriage.
Daniel Parker barely slept. The Polaroid never left his hand. He carried it from the kitchen to the bedroom, from the bedroom to the living room, and back again. Every few minutes he turned it over. 7 words. "This was the last time you looked at me." The sentence felt less like an accusation and more like a question he couldn't answer. He remembered the honeymoon. He remembered the cabin. He remembered the snow. He remembered Emma laughing because she couldn't light the fireplace. He remembered teaching her how to paddle the blue canoe that sat frozen beside the lake. He remembered almost everything. Almost. Saturday morning arrived beneath another blanket of Seattle rain. Daniel spread the Polaroid across the dining table beneath a bright desk lamp. Years of studying architectural blueprints had trained his eyes to notice tiny details. He wasn't looking at a memory anymore. He was examining evidence. He took out a magnifying glass from his office drawer. The old photograph slowly revealed details invisible to the naked eye. The wooden railing, fresh footprints in the snow, the reflection of the frozen lake inside the cabin windows. Then, Daniel froze. There, barely visible inside the cabin window, stood a blurry silhouette. Someone, watching. His heartbeat quickened. He leaned closer. The figure was distorted by the glass, too blurred to identify, but undeniably human. Daniel looked back at the front of the photograph. Emma stood smiling on the porch, coffee cup in both hands, snowflakes resting in her hair. If Emma was standing outside, and Daniel remembered lowering his own camera, then who had taken the photograph? For nearly an hour, he searched through old photo albums stored in the hallway closet. Wedding albums, family vacations, Christmas mornings, birthdays. Nothing. Not one photograph matched the Polaroid. It had never appeared in any album. It had never been framed. Neither of them had ever spoken about it. It was as though the picture had quietly disappeared from their lives long before Emma did. By noon, Daniel had made his decision. 3 hours later, the highway curved through dense evergreen forests as he drove north toward the mountains. Rain slowly became mist. Mist became light snow. The farther he traveled, the quieter the world became. The road looked almost identical to the one they had driven 15 years earlier. Back then, Emma had spent most of the drive photographing rain-covered windows, roadside diners, and abandoned barns. Daniel smiled beside himself. She once said, "Everyone photographs the destination. I like photographing the road that gets us there." At the time, he had laughed. Now, those words stayed with him.
Late afternoon sunlight broke through heavy clouds as Daniel reached the lake. The cabin still stood exactly where he remembered. Fresh pine trees surrounded the shoreline. The blue canoe, older now, still rested beside the dock. For one impossible moment, it felt as though time had simply waited. Daniel stepped from the car. Cold mountain air filled his lungs. Every sound seemed louder. The wind through the trees, the distant ripple of water, the crunch of snow beneath his boots. He slowly removed the Polaroid from his jacket pocket. Standing exactly where Emma had stood 15 years earlier, he looked toward the cabin porch, then toward the window, trying to imagine the moment frozen forever inside the photograph. A voice interrupted the silence. "I was beginning to wonder if one of you would ever come back." Daniel turned. An elderly man stood near the reception office carrying a bundle of firewood. His silver beard reached almost to his coat collar. Kind eyes, weathered hands. He looked at Daniel for a long moment, then smiled softly. "I remember you." Daniel blinked. "Do you?" The old man nodded. "Architect from Seattle." He chuckled. "And your wife?" His smile grew warmer. "She photographed absolutely everything." Daniel felt something tighten inside his chest. The old man looked toward the Polaroid still resting in Daniel's hand. His expression changed, very slightly, almost too quickly to notice. Then he quietly asked, "Is that the picture the young photographer took of you two?" Daniel's breathing stopped. Young photographer? He slowly looked back down at the Polaroid. For 15 years, he had believed only 2 people had witnessed that morning. Now, for the first time, he realized someone else had been there. Daniel stared at the elderly man. His thoughts raced faster than he could control. There was someone else? The old man nodded. There was. He set the bundle of firewood beside the office door and brushed the snow from his gloves. A young backpacker. Couldn't have been older than 22. Traveling across Washington with an old film camera. He stayed here for 2 nights. Daniel looked back at the Polaroid again. "So he took this?" The old man smiled. "I remember because your wife was embarrassed." Daniel frowned. "Embarrassed?" The old man laughed quietly. "You two kept trying to photograph each other, but neither of you had a picture together, so that young man offered. 'You deserve at least one photograph from your honeymoon,' he said." Daniel closed his eyes. A memory, small, almost forgotten, began returning. A cheerful stranger, a green hiking backpack, an old instant camera hanging from his neck. Emma laughing as she whispered, "Finally, proof that you actually came with me." Daniel smiled beside himself. It had happened. He had simply forgotten. The mystery of the photographer disappeared, but something much heavier remained. If Emma had remembered that moment 15 years later, why had he completely erased it from his own memory? The old man quietly unlocked the reception office. "I've got something you might want to see." Daniel followed him inside. The cabin office looked untouched by time. Wooden walls, old brass keys hanging from hooks, faded maps, stacks of handwritten reservation books stretching back decades. The old man disappeared into a storage room. A minute later, he returned carrying a thick leather guest book. Dust covered the edges. He gently placed it on the wooden counter. "I never throw these away." Daniel carefully opened the cover. Year after year, thousands of signatures filled the pages. Families, newlyweds, anniversaries, birthdays. Then the old man stopped turning pages. There. Daniel looked down. 15 years earlier, room 7, Daniel Parker, Emma Parker. His own handwriting appeared first, simple, forgettable. Beautiful place, amazing views. Nothing more. The old man smiled gently. "Keep reading." Beneath Daniel's short message, Emma had written nearly an entire page. Daniel had never seen it before, not once. His fingers trembled as he began reading. "If we're reading this years from now, I hope we've never become too busy to come back here. I hope we still laugh when one of us burns breakfast. I hope we still dance in the kitchen when nobody's watching.
I hope we still stop to photograph ordinary days, because those are usually the ones we'll miss the most." Daniel swallowed hard, his vision blurred. Emma's handwriting continued. "And if life ever becomes louder than us, I hope one of us remembers this weekend before we forget how to look at each other." Silence filled the room. Daniel couldn't move. He slowly looked back at the Polaroid, then at Emma's words, then back again. The message on the photograph, "This was the last time you looked at me." Suddenly, it no longer sounded like blame. It sounded like heartbreak. The old man quietly spoke. "She loved writing." Daniel nodded without lifting his eyes. "I know." The old man smiled sadly. "No, I don't think you did." The words landed harder than Daniel expected. Not cruelly, not angrily, simply, honestly. As evening settled across the lake, Daniel walked outside carrying the guestbook memories inside his mind. The mountains glowed beneath the setting sun. Everything around him remained breathtakingly beautiful, exactly as Emma had remembered it, exactly as he had forgotten it. He stood beside the frozen blue canoe, looking at the cabin, looking at the porch, trying to understand how two people could remember the same weekend so differently. His phone suddenly vibrated. Unknown number. He hesitated, then answered. "Hello?" A calm voice spoke. "Mr. Parker, my name is Evelyn Brooks. I'm calling because something was delivered to my gallery this morning." Daniel frowned. "I think it belongs to your wife." His heartbeat stopped. "What is it?" There was a long silence. Then she answered, "It's another photograph, and I don't think you're going to be ready for what's on it."
The rain followed Daniel Parker all the way back to Seattle. The mountain roads disappeared behind him. The honeymoon cabin slowly became another memory in the rearview mirror. But Emma's words refused to stay behind. "I hope we still stop to photograph ordinary days, because those are usually the ones we'll miss the most." Daniel replayed the sentence over and over during the 4-hour drive home. He couldn't remember the last ordinary day he had actually noticed. The next morning, he stood outside a converted brick warehouse in Pioneer Square. A simple brass sign hung beside the entrance. Brooks Fine Art Photography. The gallery looked nothing like the large commercial studios Emma used to admire. It felt quiet, personal. The front windows displayed black and white photographs of strangers laughing, old couples holding hands, children chasing birds across empty beaches. Ordinary moments, exactly the kind of photographs Emma loved. Daniel stepped inside. A small brass bell chimed softly above the door. The gallery smelled faintly of old wood, coffee, and photographic chemicals. Rows of framed photographs lined white walls beneath warm spotlights. Every picture seemed alive, not because of perfect composition, because someone behind the camera had clearly loved the people inside it. "Mr. Parker?" Daniel turned. A woman in her early 50s approached with a gentle smile. Silver-framed glasses rested on her nose. A faded denim apron covered her black sweater. She extended her hand. "I'm Evelyn Brooks." Daniel shook it. "You called yesterday." She nodded. "I did." Her expression grew more serious. "I wish it had been under happier circumstances." Without another word, she disappeared behind the reception desk. Moments later, she returned carrying the same kind of brown paper package Daniel had received 3 weeks earlier. Same size, same wrapping paper, same rough twine tied carefully around the middle. Daniel's pulse quickened. "You haven't opened it?" Evelyn shook her head. "It wasn't addressed to me."
She placed the package gently onto a large oak table between them. It was addressed to Emma. Daniel stared silently at the handwriting. It was Emma's name, her address, her home. Everything looked normal, except she wasn't there to receive it. Carefully, he untied the string. The room felt strangely quiet. Even the rain outside seemed to disappear. Inside the wrapping, another Polaroid waited. Daniel slowly lifted it. His breath caught. A tiny apartment kitchen. Morning sunlight poured through old windows. Emma stood beside a stove, flipping pancakes while laughing at something outside the frame. Daniel instantly recognized the place. Their first apartment. The apartment where they had lived before promotions, before mortgages, before life became complicated. He turned the Polaroid over. 5 handwritten words. You stopped asking. Nothing else. No date. No explanation. Only those words. Daniel whispered them aloud. You stopped asking. He looked up. I don't understand. Evelyn didn't answer immediately. Instead, she quietly poured 2 cups of coffee. She slid one toward Daniel, then spoke very carefully. Mr. Parker, there's something I didn't tell you yesterday. Daniel looked at her. This package wasn't delivered by the post office. His eyes narrowed. What do you mean? It was hand-delivered. Silence. Daniel slowly lowered the Polaroid. A man walked into the gallery yesterday morning. He placed the package on my reception desk. He said, "Please make sure Daniel Parker receives this personally." Daniel felt the room growing smaller. You spoke to him? Yes. What did he look like? Evelyn closed her eyes for a moment, trying to remember. Average height, dark jacket, a baseball cap pulled low. I never saw his face clearly. But, she hesitated, there was one thing I noticed. Daniel leaned forward. What? He wasn't carrying a backpack. He wasn't carrying a briefcase. He carried... Another pause. An old camera. Daniel's heartbeat became loud inside his ears. What kind of camera? I don't know much about cameras, but it looked old, vintage, the kind photographers used years ago. She reached underneath the reception desk. I almost forgot. Our security camera reported him. Daniel looked up instantly. You still have it? Evelyn nodded. I saved it for the police. She turned the computer monitor toward him. The recording began. 9:17 a.m. The gallery door opened. A man entered, exactly as Evelyn described. Dark jacket, baseball cap, face hidden. He quietly placed the package on the reception desk, then turned to leave. Daniel leaned closer. The image blurred slightly as the man walked under the camera. Then, for one brief second, his shoulder turned toward the lens. Hanging from a worn leather strap was an old cream-colored vintage camera. Daniel's breathing stopped. He knew that camera. He had seen it before. Not yesterday, not last week. 15 years ago, at the Honeymoon Cabin.
Daniel couldn't stop thinking about the camera. During the drive across Seattle, every traffic light, every passing building, every reflection in the windshield brought him back to the gallery surveillance footage. The same cream-colored vintage camera,
the same style, the same shape. It couldn't be a coincidence, yet it also couldn't be proof. Thousands of photographers still collected vintage cameras. He couldn't allow himself to jump to conclusions, not anymore. Emma had already taught him how dangerous assumptions could be. Instead of driving home, Daniel turned toward Capitol Hill, toward the apartment building where their life had truly begun. It looked smaller now, older. The brick exterior had faded. The flower boxes beneath the windows had disappeared. A modern coffee shop occupied the corner grocery store where Emma used to buy fresh flowers every Friday. Time had moved on. Only Daniel had remained trapped. Apartment 3B no longer belonged to them. A young couple answered the door. Daniel introduced himself. "I'm sorry to bother you. I used to live here." The woman smiled warmly. "We've only been here a year. If you'd like, you can take a look." Daniel hesitated, then quietly accepted. The apartment felt familiar, yet strangely foreign. The walls had been painted white. The old bookshelf was gone. The tiny dining table where they had shared countless dinners had been replaced by a modern kitchen island. But one thing hadn't changed: the morning light. It still poured through the east-facing windows exactly as it had 15 years ago. Daniel slowly walked toward the kitchen. He stopped. The Polaroid, Emma, pancakes, the first apartment. The words suddenly echoed again. "You stopped asking." The memory arrived without warning. A Tuesday morning, rain tapping softly against the windows. Emma stood barefoot in the kitchen making pancakes. She wore one of Daniel's oversized college sweatshirts, her hair still damp from the shower. She smiled the moment he walked in. "Morning." Daniel kissed her forehead. "Morning." He poured himself coffee, opened his laptop. Emails, deadlines, client revisions. Emma carried 2 plates to the table. "How's work?" Without looking up, Daniel answered. "Busy." She smiled patiently. "I'm sorry." He nodded absent-mindedly. A few seconds passed. Emma quietly sat across from him, waiting. Daniel kept typing. The silence stretched between them. Finally, Emma asked another question. "What are you working on?" "A hotel project." "Big one?" "Yeah." "I hope you get it." Daniel smiled faintly. "Thanks." Then he returned to the screen. The conversation ended, not because either of them wanted it to, because Daniel never asked, "And how was your day?" The memory dissolved. Daniel slowly lowered himself into one of the apartment's new dining chairs. His chest felt heavy, not because he had ignored Emma once, because he suddenly realized he couldn't remember the last time he had asked her that question. Not really asked, not while putting away his phone, not while closing his laptop, not while giving her his complete attention. He had answered, he had spoken, he had listened, but somewhere he had stopped asking. Before leaving, the young woman smiled. "There's something downstairs you might remember." Daniel looked confused. "The community mural. They never painted over it." The mural covered an entire wall in the apartment courtyard. Hundreds of residents had added tiny paintings over the years. Flowers, pets, children, favorite memories. Daniel slowly walked along the wall. Then he saw it. A small painted Polaroid, barely larger than his hand. Inside the painted frame, Emma had recreated a simple morning scene: 2 coffee mugs, an open window, sunlight. Nothing extraordinary. Below it, in Emma's unmistakable handwriting, were 7 words: "The smallest silences become the biggest distances." Daniel stared at the mural. She had painted this years ago, while they still lived there. She had tried to say something, not with arguments, not with tears, with art, and he had never seen it. His phone suddenly vibrated. Officer Rebecca Morales. Daniel answered immediately. "Daniel?" Her voice sounded unusually serious. "Mr. Parker, we finished enhancing the gallery security footage." Daniel looked back at Emma's painted Polaroid. "Did you identify him?" A long silence followed, long enough for Daniel to stop breathing. Finally, Morales answered, "We identified the camera." Daniel frowned. "What about the man?" Another pause. Then, very quietly, she said, "We believe it's the same camera that belonged to Noah Mercer." Daniel's heart pounded. "The honeymoon photographer?" "Yes. But that's impossible." "I know. Because, according to official records," she hesitated, "Noah Mercer died in a climbing accident 11 years ago." Silence. Daniel slowly lowered the phone. The mural, the Polaroid, the surveillance footage, the camera. Nothing made sense anymore. For the first time, the mystery wasn't becoming clearer. It was becoming impossible.
The drive home from the apartment courtyard was silent. Officer Rebecca Morales's words refused to leave Daniel Parker's mind. Noah Mercer died 11 years ago. It should have ended the investigation. Instead, it made every answer feel impossible. By sunrise the next morning, Daniel wasn't thinking about the delivery man anymore. He was thinking about Noah. Who was he? Why had Emma trusted a stranger's photographs with the most important chapter of her life? And more importantly, how had someone gained access to photographs taken by a man who had been dead for more than a decade? Daniel spent the morning searching public records, travel blogs, photography forums, old newspaper archives. The pieces slowly came together. Noah Mercer, adventure photographer, landscape artist, occasional wedding photographer, known for documenting ordinary moments instead of posed portraits. One article quoted him saying, "The second people forget the camera exists, that's when life finally tells the truth." Daniel read the sentence twice, then a third time. It sounded exactly like Emma, not because they knew each other, but because they had believed the same thing. One article mentioned that after Noah's fatal climbing accident, his life's work had been preserved by his older sister, the Mercer Archive, a small private collection just outside Seattle. No public exhibitions, no commercial licensing, only preservation. Daniel didn't hesitate. The archive occupied a renovated farmhouse overlooking rolling green hills. Unlike modern museums, it felt deeply personal. Vintage cameras filled glass cabinets. Old contact sheets covered the walls. Hundreds of framed photographs captured people laughing when they thought no one was watching. Parents tying children's shoes. A grandfather asleep in a rocking chair. Friends sharing fries at a roadside diner. No perfect poses, only real life.
Daniel immediately understood why Emma admired this kind of photography. It didn't celebrate perfection, it celebrated presence. A woman in her 60s approached him. Kind eyes, silver hair pulled into a loose bun. She introduced herself simply, "I'm Claire Mercer." Daniel offered his hand. "I'm Daniel Parker." Something changed in Claire's expression. "You were expecting me?" She smiled gently. "No, but I recognized your wife." Daniel frowned. "You met Emma?" Claire nodded. 3 weeks ago. Everything inside him became still. Emma had been here, not years ago, 3 weeks before disappearing. Claire slowly walked toward a wooden cabinet. She spent almost 4 hours in this room. She didn't ask many questions. She just, Claire smiled softly, looked at photographs. Daniel glanced around the quiet archive. "Did she tell you why she came?" Claire shook her head. "No, but before she left, she asked if my brother's honeymoon negatives were still preserved." Daniel's pulse quickened. "And?" "They were." Claire unlocked the cabinet. Inside sat dozens of carefully labeled archival boxes. She removed one, handwritten on the label, "Winter Cabin, 15 years ago." Daniel stared at it. Claire carefully placed the box on the viewing table. "There are 8 negatives." She looked at him. "Your wife requested high-resolution archival prints." Daniel whispered, "Only 8?" Claire smiled. "My brother always said, if 8 photographs can't tell the story, the photographer wasn't paying attention." Daniel slowly opened the archival box. 8 negatives, 8 ordinary moments, 8 forgotten memories. And somehow, Daniel knew, this box contained far more than photographs. It contained the life he had stopped noticing.
Daniel asked Claire about the surveillance footage. Claire smiled gently. "That wasn't Noah. It was Michael. He worked with my brother for years. When Emma came here, she asked if he'd help deliver something after she was gone. She said the camera mattered, not because of who carried it, but because of what Daniel would remember when he saw it." Daniel Parker didn't open Emma's envelope immediately. He carried it home the same way someone carries a fragile photograph, carefully, almost afraid that touching it too soon might somehow change what it contained. That evening, rain tapped softly against the living room windows. Murphy lay asleep beside the fireplace. The house was silent. Not the painful silence Daniel had grown used to over the past few weeks. A quieter one. The kind that invited reflection instead of loneliness. He sat at the dining table where the journey had begun. The first Polaroid rested beside him. Then the second. Then the archival print Claire Mercer had given him. 3 ordinary moments. 3 pieces of the same story. Finally, Daniel slid his finger beneath the envelope. Inside was a single folded letter. Emma's handwriting filled both sides of the page. He recognized it instantly. Neat, patient, unhurried. His hands trembled as he unfolded it. The first line stole his breath. "If you're reading this, you remembered." Daniel closed his eyes. For several seconds, he couldn't continue. Not because the words were complicated, because Emma believed he could still find his way back. He forced himself to keep reading. "If you're here, it means the photographs did what I hoped they would. Not because they solved a mystery, but because they helped you slow down long enough to see what we stopped seeing together." Daniel swallowed hard. There was no anger in her writing. No blame. Only sadness. And hope. Further down the page, another paragraph caught his attention. "You always believed love disappeared in dramatic moments. I don't think it does. I think it disappears a little every day we stop noticing each other." Daniel lowered the letter. His eyes wandered around the kitchen. He remembered buying the expensive dining table, the custom lighting, the imported coffee machine. He could remember every receipt, but he couldn't remember the last quiet Sunday breakfast they had shared without either of them checking a phone. That realization hurt more than any accusation ever could. Inside the envelope rested one more item, a small notebook. Its cover simply read, "Things I Miss." Daniel opened the first page. There were no long explanations, only short entries. Simple. Honest. "I miss racing grocery carts down empty aisles." Daniel smiled through damp eyes. A memory returned. Emma laughing as she pushed the cart too fast while an elderly cashier pretended not to notice. The next page. "I miss sharing one umbrella even when we owned two." Another memory. Daniel pulling Emma closer because the rain kept blowing sideways. Neither of them cared that they were getting soaked. Another page. "I miss burnt pancakes becoming an excuse to order takeout." He laughed quietly. She had never been a good cook. She always claimed the smoke alarm was simply part of the recipe. Another page. "I miss reading beside you without saying anything." He remembered Sunday afternoons, Emma with a novel, Daniel sketching building ideas, neither speaking, yet somehow never feeling alone. The notebook continued. "I miss you pointing out clouds that looked like animals. I miss taking the long road home. I miss hearing you sing when you thought I couldn't hear. I miss when we noticed sunsets before notifications." Daniel closed the notebook. None of those memories involved anniversaries, or vacations, or expensive gifts. They were ordinary, which made them extraordinary. For the first time, he understood what Emma had been trying to save. The next morning, Daniel drove to the neighborhood grocery store. Without thinking, he reached for only one shopping basket, then stopped. He smiled to himself, picked up a cart instead. He slowly walked every aisle, not because he needed groceries, because Emma loved wandering without a list. He bought fresh flowers, not roses, wildflowers. Emma always said roses tried too hard. Outside the store, he noticed a young father struggling to take a photograph of his wife and daughter together. Without hesitation, Daniel walked over. "Would you like me to take one for you?" The father smiled gratefully and handed him the phone. Daniel stepped back. He waited. Not for them to pose, but for the little girl to laugh at something her mother whispered. Click. He lowered the phone. The photograph felt real, exactly the way Noah Mercer had described. As he handed the phone back, the father looked at the picture and smiled. "That's perfect." Daniel shook his head gently. "No." He looked at the family still laughing together. It was already perfect. He simply noticed it. That afternoon, Daniel visited the waterfront. He sat on a familiar wooden bench overlooking Puget Sound. No emails, no meetings, no headphones, just waves, seagulls, wind. For the first time in years, he watched the sun disappear beneath the horizon without looking away. His phone vibrated. A message, no number, only a photograph, the very bench where he was sitting, taken from several feet away. His heart raced. A second message arrived. Tomorrow. A third followed. 10 a.m. Nothing more. Daniel looked at the empty seat beside him, then folded Emma's letter carefully, placed it inside his jacket, and for the first time since she disappeared, he wasn't afraid of what tomorrow might bring. He was ready to see it. The next morning arrived quietly. No rain, no fog, only a clear autumn sky stretching above Seattle, as if the city itself had decided to stop hiding. Daniel Parker barely slept, not because he was afraid, because, for the first time in weeks, hope had kept him awake. Emma's letter rested inside his jacket. The notebook titled "Things I Miss" remained on the passenger seat, and beside it, wrapped carefully in brown paper, rested the 8 archival photographs Claire Mercer had entrusted to him. Daniel drove toward the waterfront without turning on the radio. For once, silence felt like company. 9:52 a.m. He parked a block away. The familiar path toward Puget Sound looked exactly as it had the evening before. Seagulls drifted above the water. Morning runners passed with coffee cups in their hands. A street musician quietly tuned an old acoustic guitar. Ordinary life, the kind Emma had always loved. Daniel smiled without realizing it. Months ago, he would have walked past every one of those moments. Today, he noticed all of them. The waterfront bench came into view. Empty. Daniel stopped. His heartbeat slowed. Had he misunderstood the message? He looked around. Nothing. Only waves gently touching the shoreline. Then he noticed something beside the bench. A small paper cup, steam still rising. Someone had only just poured the coffee. He looked toward the water, and there she was, Emma, standing at the railing, looking across Puget Sound, exactly the way she always used to. She wasn't hiding, she wasn't running, she wasn't waiting dramatically. She was simply watching the ferries cross the water, as though this were any ordinary Saturday morning. Daniel didn't move. For a long moment, he simply looked at her, really looked. The breeze lifted the ends of her chestnut hair. She wore a light blue sweater beneath a beige coat, the same comfortable jeans she always wore on weekends. One hand rested around a warm coffee cup. The other held a paperback novel folded closed against her side. Nothing about her looked mysterious. She looked like home. Emma slowly turned. Their eyes met. Neither smiled immediately. Neither cried. Neither rushed forward. They simply stood there. Two people separated only by a few steps and several years of silence. Emma spoke first. "You came." Daniel let out a quiet laugh. "I finally learned how." For the first time, she smiled, small, gentle, real. She walked toward the bench, sat down, leaving enough space beside her for one more person, just as she always had. Daniel sat. Neither of them spoke. The silence lasted almost half a minute, but this time it wasn't empty. It was comfortable.
the kind of silence they used to share while reading together on Sunday afternoons. Emma looked out across the water. "I wondered if you'd notice." Daniel glanced at her. "The photographs?" She nodded. "No." She smiled softly. "The birds." Daniel followed her eyes. A flock of gulls circled above the ferry before disappearing into the bright morning sky. "I noticed." "I know." Another quiet moment passed. Emma wrapped both hands around her coffee. "I wasn't trying to make you solve a puzzle." "I know." "I wasn't trying to punish you." "I know." She turned toward him. "What changed?" Daniel took a long breath. "I stopped looking for where you went and started looking at who we had become." Emma lowered her eyes. "I should have talked to you sooner." Daniel shook his head gently. "And I should have listened long before you needed to." She looked at him again. Tears shimmered in her eyes, not from anger, from relief. "I kept waiting for the right moment." "So did I." And while we were waiting, Daniel finished her sentence. "Life kept happening." Emma nodded silently. "I disappeared before I left." Daniel closed his eyes. "I know." "I disappeared too." Neither defended themselves, neither searched for excuses. For the first time in years, they were simply telling each other the truth. Emma reached into her canvas bag. Carefully, she removed 8 photographs, the honeymoon photographs. She placed them one by one across the wooden bench between them. Daniel looked down. There they were, the frozen lake, the burnt pancakes, the canoe, the cabin porch, the snowfall, coffee at sunrise, walking through the trees, laughing for no reason. He smiled. "I forgot how happy we looked." Emma gently shook her head. "No." She touched the first photograph. "You remembered that." Then she touched another. "What you forgot was where you were looking."
Emma picked up the first photograph. Daniel stood beside the frozen lake, smiling at something outside the frame. She turned it toward him. "Look carefully." Daniel frowned. "I am." "No." She smiled softly. "Look again." His eyes moved across the photograph, past the mountains, past the lake, past the cabin. Then he noticed it. He wasn't looking at the scenery. He wasn't looking at the photographer. He was looking at Emma. She handed him the second photograph, the canoe. Again, his eyes were on her. The third, breakfast on the porch. He was watching her laugh. The fourth, walking through fresh snow. Again, Emma. The fifth, coffee at sunrise. Emma. The sixth, the cabin doorway. Emma. The seventh, the trail through the pine trees. Emma. The eighth, the famous Polaroid. Emma. Daniel slowly lowered the photographs. His hands trembled. "I never realized." Emma nodded. "You didn't have to. You were simply present." She reached into her bag once more. This time, she removed another small stack of photographs, much newer. Architectural award ceremonies, holiday dinners, birthday parties, vacations, family gatherings, pictures from the last 5 years. She spread them beside the honeymoon photographs. Daniel's heart sank. In every newer picture, he was smiling, but his eyes were somewhere else. Toward the camera, toward his phone, toward the stage, toward the audience, toward the city skyline, toward everything except Emma. He couldn't speak. He didn't need to. The photographs already had. Emma quietly said, "I don't think you stopped loving me." Daniel looked up. "I think. Life slowly became louder than we were." The breeze carried silence between them. Not uncomfortable, not painful, simply honest. Daniel looked back toward the photographs. "I kept believing that I was doing everything for us. I know. I thought working harder meant loving harder." Emma smiled sadly. "I know. I even admired how hard you worked." She paused. "But eventually, I stopped recognizing the man I was trying to come home to." Daniel closed his eyes. "I'm sorry." Emma reached across the bench. She gently took his hand. "I'm not here because I wanted an apology." He looked at her. "I'm here because I wanted the truth." For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The ferry horn echoed across Puget Sound. People walked past them. Children laughed nearby. Life continued, exactly as it always had. Emma finally asked the question she had carried for months. "If I came home today," she hesitated, "and nothing changed, would you still want me back?" Daniel didn't answer immediately. He looked across the water, then toward the photographs. Finally, he looked directly into Emma's eyes. "No." A flicker of pain crossed her face. Before she could speak, Daniel continued, "Because I don't want us to go back. I don't want the marriage we almost lost. I don't want to become the man who stopped seeing the woman sitting beside him." His voice grew quieter. "I want to build something neither of us has ever had." Emma searched his face. "What?" "A marriage where ordinary moments matter as much as extraordinary ones. A marriage where dinner without phones is important. Where sunsets aren't interruptions. Where work supports life instead of replacing it. And where I never again assume you'll always be waiting when I finally look up." Emma's eyes filled with tears. Not tears of sadness. Tears of finally being understood. She reached into her coat pocket. One final Polaroid. Blank. She placed it in Daniel's hand. He turned it over. Only one sentence was written on the back. "Every beautiful photograph begins with someone choosing to look." Daniel smiled. Not the polite smile he wore in business photographs. Not the practiced smile from award ceremonies. A quiet, grateful, human smile. He looked at Emma. Really looked. "I'd like to take you home." Emma smiled through tears. "I'd like that." 6 months later, Saturday morning. Sunlight spilled through the kitchen windows. A frying pan sizzled. Smoke rose toward the ceiling. Daniel laughed. "I burned them again." Emma leaned against the kitchen doorway, holding a small instant camera. "You know, I think you're finally getting the recipe right." He laughed. "So the secret ingredient really is burnt pancakes?" She nodded. "Always has been." They ordered takeout anyway, just as they used to. Later that afternoon, they wandered slowly through a neighborhood bookstore. No destination, no schedule, only time.
Daniel disappeared briefly between the shelves. When he returned, he carried a photographic book. Emma smiled. I was wondering how long that would take. As evening arrived, rain began falling. Daniel opened one umbrella. Emma looked at the second umbrella in his hand. He folded it closed. She laughed. I was hoping you'd do that. They walked together under the same umbrella, shoulder against shoulder, exactly as they had years before.